This is the Dallas Morning News. This episode is from an independent podcast hosted by the Dallas Morning News Opinion Team.
Kyle, Chief Brown's one of the more remarkable people I've seen. He is, to me, the perfect example of servant leadership, and what we've got coming up is a great example of his life story, as well as talking some really tough police issues.
Yeah, difficult topics. He's served in both Dallas and Chicago. He's had a storied career. He's a UT alum, so for the Dallas people out there and the Texas people listening, he's a native. But this episode has a lot in it, from guns to community policing to neighborhoods to the events of July 7th, 2016.
And I especially appreciate him telling the story of him growing up and how he got to those positions, as well as some pretty tough stories on the most difficult days he had as police chief.
Yeah, I think what was neat is just his touch on his faith as well, the personal element, humanizing a police chief, bring him down to how the typical Dallasite is going to view that person. Chief Brown did it really well.
And a pretty good contrast between Dallas and Chicago, too.
You got it. We touched on a lot.
A good one, worth listening to.
Welcome to Intersections, where we take a multi-generational look at the critical issues facing America. And today we have Chief Brown. Tom, you want to introduce our guest?
Chief, thanks for being with us, first of all.
Thank you, Mayor.
Nearly 40 years on police forces.
Yes.
Head and chief in two distinct large cities. Dallas, reputation, one of the finest police forces.
That's right.
And then moved over to Chicago, where some real challenges. So we appreciate you being with us. Given that career, Chief, let's start out with looking back over it. Think about some of the more difficult moments. What are the most difficult moments that you dealt with in those 40 years of police service?
Yeah, it's hard to pick one, but you had so many challenges in policing, and I've been had a front row seat coming into policing in 1983 as a rookie cop and leaving policing in 2016 in Dallas and then leaving it again in 2023 in Chicago. I've kind of seen it all, kind of a lot of ebbs and flows of the profession. Still a noble profession, but I will say some of the more, difficult moments are always when you lose a cop to tragedy, but also, coming from the community, particularly in Dallas. I'm from the neighborhood, never lost sight of that. When you lose people in the community through violence, it really tugs at you, looking at what you could have done, particularly as a leader. What could I have done to, lower the murder rate or lower violence or, do some of those things. So, just losing people, I would say, is some of the more difficult things, both officers and people in the community.
Toughest 2 days I ever had as mayor were when we lost two police officers. Right. Being there, being with the family, it was the toughest. In the early 90s, you lost your partner. Yeah,
I did. That was one of the most difficult moments about me continuing in the profession. Me and Walter Williams were that close as partners. He was an older guy in the police academy. He had already served in the military, and he just became my mentor in the academy, kind of talking to me about why we were doing this and really instilled a lot of principles in me about leadership early on. He wanted to be chief. I never wanted to be chief. And we had this deal.
That's the way life turns out.
When you're chief, you make sure I get this assignment, that assignment, and I'll be your biggest supporter. He gets killed at a domestic violence call 5 years into our careers. I'm a detective at that time in crime scene, and I get a call to this crime scene, not knowing who the victims are, see his glasses on the ground, almost like it was yesterday. I can recount what happened, and asking, who's the officer? And just hearing that, and I'm stunned. And I don't recover for a long time after that.
You thought about leaving?
I thought about other careers. I started graduate school, then trying to think about, okay, I can't go through this again, losing somebody close to me like that. I knew his kids. We spent a lot of time together. I knew his wife, kids, so I just, wanted to quit. And it's just, he instilled in me this thing, and I kind of lived out what he wanted, Then I started having aspirations about being chief, kind of an extension of Walter. So that's kind of the backstory for me. I never wanted the politics of being chief. I hated that part of the job, and I told him, "Good luck with that, Walter. You let me know how it is." And here I am now fulfilling and having fulfilled what history were.
Very successfully.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't want to be chief because you'd have to deal with Mayor Leppert.
He was one of the pleasant politicians I had. I mean, just fast forward to today is much worse.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so take me back July 7th, 2016. I think for the younger audience here, that's a critical day in Dallas's history.
Yeah.
How'd you find out that evening? What was the first hour like? Take me through some of those events.
So
of that awful
evening.
This
is one of the things that I talk about a lot. Not recently, it's been 8 years, a little over 8 years, almost 9 years this year.
Yeah.
Since that tragedy happened in Dallas, where we lost 5 officers and several civilians were wounded. And people focus on George Floyd's death and murder, but prior to that, there were protests associated with officers that are committing excessive force against unarmed Black people, Black men in particular. Some deadly force encounters where people are killed and not justified, and nobody's getting prosecuted, no officers are getting prosecuted. So there were protests in 2016, kind of a precursor to George Floyd's incident and the explosion of protests and social justice movements from that. But in 2016, there were smaller protests, but they were nationwide, happening in all of the major city downtowns. That was happening in Dallas. And we were managing it like we've always managed protests, giving people the right, First Amendment, free speech, you obviously freedom to protest anything about our government. And so we were protecting the scene. We had our security measures in place in case things went wrong. We had our SWAT team on standby, and unbeknownst to us, a lone gunman, former military guy who had trained.
Yeah, well trained.
Was, kind of blending in with the protesters. And our officers, blocking traffic, making sure people are not getting run over by cars as they march in the street. And we're thinking this was going to, kind of break off peacefully. The protests actually ended the march, and it became a, kind of people giving speeches somewhere downtown near El Centro College. And then shots rang out, and just repeatedly shots rang out. And, I know a lot about shots ringing out. I haven't been in SWAT 9 years prior to me being chief. And it echoes in a downtown. You don't really know where the shots are coming from because it just sounds very loud echoes, like it could be from anywhere. And so people scrambling, taking cover. The first officer's hit, second officer's hit, third officer's hit. I'm at headquarters, getting towards the end of the protest, hearing that we have shots fired. Almost immediately after hearing that there were shots fired downtown, an officer is pronounced, and then a second, then a third, and then this is more serious of an event than we've ever had in downtown. Just really in this country where you had multiple officers in a single event, other than 9/11.
Yeah.
So we had, it ended up being 5 officers, and again, it became a national event. It was, televised live on all networks, including cable networks, and the beginnings of people streaming things happening on their phone. It's not like it is today, but, a lot of things happening and being said on Twitter about what was happening. And we still didn't know whether it was one or multiple people shooting at us. We narrowed that down. We ended up getting the suspect cornered in El Centro on the second floor, who continued to shoot at us while he was there.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because it's the first time, and you made the call. It wasn't the mayor, it wasn't the city manager.
Right.
You made the call.
Right.
To use a robot to go into an individual who was cornered but had pretty good coverage with concrete walls, et cetera.
That's right.
You made the judgment that was the only way you could do it to save the officers.
Right. Yes, right. Mayor, and we negotiated quite a bit with the person, trying to end it peacefully. And it was clear to us this wasn't going to end peacefully, that either more officers or civilians were going to get killed or seriously injured unless we took things into our own hand. And I asked the commander on the ground, who's good friends with me. We actually served in SWAT together in the 90s. It's one of the reasons why I put him in that position, somebody you trusted in case you had a crisis to deal with things and give you recommendations that were sound, safe, that kind of thing. So he gave me this very strange recommendation to use small amount of C4 attached to our bomb robot. The bomb robot usually diffuses bombs. Never been used to actually, activate a bomb, and just enough C4 for an explosive entry into a door, but would kill a person. Never been tried before in policing history. Never been tried since in policing. Likely never to be tried again. It is a career-ending decision for a chief to make, and it's for the chief to make. No officer would think that a chief would approve that. Matter of fact, there were people on the ground later told me, man, I heard them talking about this. I said, no way Brown's approving that, man. Y'all wasting your time. Everybody's just laughing. That's a stupid recommendation. And because I trusted Bill Humphrey so much, he was comfortable making it to me. And I said, walk me through that. He had to walk me through it a couple of times. And I was like, man, what if because these are all electronics, what if the robot stops in between? What if the bomb doesn't detonate? You got this C4 between you and the guy now. I said, tell me how we're going to resolve that. He said, well, no, we can't resolve it. It can't fail. The robot got to get there for it to be successful. And in between press conferences, Mayor Rollins and I did one press conference at the beginning to people, let them know what was happening. And then we were scheduling a second press conference. So in between press conferences, unbeknownst to Mayor Rollins, I approved this for it to happen. And as we were having the second press conference, it was happening. And Mayor Rollins and I finished the second press conference, and it went off successfully. And I said, hey, I need to tell you something, Mayor. It's one of those things. And Mayor Leppert laughing because I've done that to him, not at this level, but I've had him, hey, Mayor, I need to talk to you about something. It's never good when I need to talk to you about something, from a police chief to a mayor. And I explained to him, he was walking, and he just like all the blood out of him just drained out of his face. I mean, he's just looked at me like, you used what? You did what? And you did what? I said, yeah, and he's deceased. And I would do it again. And 100% support from Mayor Rollins.
So was the suspect that barricaded that was the only option?
Yeah, so he was that barricaded. It's if you go upstairs at El Centro, that really large, round concrete pillars that can secrete a person. You don't even know where they are. You no way to get to them. The hallways are just sheetrock. And there's no metal down the hallway, so it's a long hallway, just sheetrock behind a very large concrete pillar that holds the building up. And that was one of the questions I had. I said, you're not going to take down this building while taking it. They said, no, we practice this. And he talked about a school that he and I are very familiar with, where you practice explosive entries. I said, okay, I'm familiar with that school. He said, yeah, we went to that school. We won first place in this competition. And so we're very competent in this type of procedure. Now, I said, it's never been used for this purpose. But yeah, we approved it, and we would, in hindsight, every year I talk about this, I would still do it again to end this siege.
Tough days, tough decisions.
Yeah.
Let's go back, though.
Mm-hmm.
You were raised by a single mom.
Yep.
I can identify with that. In South Oak Cliff. So you understood some of the tougher neighborhoods that later on you had responsibility for. Walk us through, what was the attraction to getting into policing?
Right.
Your brother, unfortunately, was killed by drug dealers.
Right.
Was that a factor?
Not just that. That came later. I was already on the department and a sergeant when my younger brother was killed by drug dealers. Back in 82, 83, I was a senior at the University of Texas at Austin. Hook 'em horns. And spring break, you come back home for Christmas break. So the junior year coming back home for those breaks, the crack cocaine epidemic starts in my neighborhood. Prior to that, coming back home, playing with all my friends, pick up basketball, normal setting. It's no different than when I was in high school, junior high school. Come back home junior year, you start playing pickup ball. You win, they lose. They want to fight. Someone grabs a gun. I'm like, for a kid that you knew from elementary school, increasingly more violent. I'm asking around, what's up with, Billy? He said, well, he's on that stuff. I said, what stuff? I'm in Austin, kind of dealing with 6th Street, no crack at that point. And you come back and you get familiar with these kids are all experimenting with crack and getting addicted and becoming different people. They become different people, increasingly more violent. And so come back the next break. After that, I don't want to come back. But my mom is still there. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, you're at college, distracted from, man, what are these people I know and known all my life going to do as my mom is going to the grocery store? So that's the tug of war I had. And one Christmas break, I come back and tell my mom what I'm doing. And she's like, you got to be, no. She said, no. And it's like everybody in my family is like, no, don't. I'm the person in my family and still today who was going to be the person that helped them get out of poverty. That's how we looked at things. The education was your way out of poverty. And, you get whatever kid can do it to come back and, get a good career or start a business or do something to help, grow us out of this circumstance. And policing wasn't that kind of salary. You know what I mean? It was like $21,000 a year. Yeah. It was just like, my mom was so disappointed. And my dad was kind of in and out. And he was so disappointed as well. Everybody tried to talk me out of it. I'm so headstrong with something I want to do. And I kind of saw, that I could come back here, not knowing anything about assignments, how people get assigned when they're rookies. I could come back here and I could, I know all these kids, they would listen to me or I'd put them in jail, some kind of, the Superman solution. I'm a typical 20-some-year-old thinking I could save the world, not knowing, that's almost impossible to do. But that's how I got started in policing.
So over your time in policing, how did the neighborhood change, evolve? How did you police going from a entry kind of beat cop to ultimately being chief? How did you police differently down in the neighborhood you grew up in?
I can answer that by telling a story about me riding with another white cop. We were riding. I actually got assigned to my old neighborhood. It was a mistake. It was a mistake in the paperwork. Because I went to UT, nobody thought I was from Oak Cliff. You know what I mean? You just don't make that connection. So they assigned me to Oak Cliff, which is where I was born and raised. So I knew everything about the geography of Oak Cliff, all the people, all the businesses. People all knew my family I'm a third generation Dallasite, so I knew everybody. I can answer the question better by telling a story. So I'm on patrol I'm a rookie, and I get assigned with a rookie, a younger rookie, which is not uncommon on the evening shift. And we're riding, we see this car full of kids, black kids, full of smoke. We know it's marijuana. We pull them over. I kind of know, these are not, gangbangers or anybody's gonna hurt, but they were just, joyriding, having fun, getting high. And we pull them over, but I'm concerned because what I would do if I was by myself with these people would be different than what I would do with somebody I don't know or trust as an officer. Because they would probably turn me in for using my discretion kind of too much. So, I'm talking to the kid. I'm saying, well, tell me what's going on. And this kid was a kid that played for Texas A&M and was home for break with some friends who were getting high in the car.
Big downside for them.
But he was driving. And, so he owns, he's bought and paid for, he's responsible. And they have a bag of marijuana. They're obviously, it's them with the marijuana, not him. And so I get him out of the car. We're talking about, he's telling me his story about, man, if I get arrested, man, I'm going to lose my scholarship this year. I'm going to get kicked out of school. My mom going to be, so I said, man, I'm with you on that. But I said, I don't know, man. So the cop was there with me. I said, I would do something. So I'm there thinking about how to get this kid out of going to jail. So I go ask the other three. I was trying to convince them to take ownership of the marijuana. None of them do. And I talking to him. I said, see, that's who you should not be in the car with doing stuff. These are not your friends. And next time you come on break, whether we decide what we do here, you cannot get back in the car with these people. They're going to ruin your life. And so I'm giving him a lecture on the side. As I'm giving him a lecture, my partner, his name is Rusty, white guy, redheaded. He walks up to the car. I'm looking at him out of the corner of my eye. He's getting the marijuana, and it's near a sewer deal, and he's dumping it in the sewer, which is what I would have done, but I didn't know how I was going to do it without him seeing it. This is before body camera. So he's dumping it in the sewer, and I'm looking at Rusty. I'm like, okay, bro, we're going to be good. We're going to be good partners. and because he heard the story, kind of listened to me talk, and we let him go. We gave him a strong, stern lecture. But the answer to your question about how did policing your neighborhood, saving kids from themselves was one of the main motivations. It wasn't just putting people in jail, which I knew that was my job. Violent people, yes. This kid needed somebody to have some discretion to further his life. He needed a lecture, but he needs somebody to care about him too. And it's I would say probably more uncommon for a cop to give that kind of break at that time, particularly. My hope is more officers use their discretion in those ways, making a distinction between violent people that need to be arrested and put in jail and people that just need some discretion and some understanding.
But it was a real evolution for you. Your book, you wrote a book, memoirs, Call to Rise, Life in Faithful Service.
Yep.
In that, you talk of coming on the force, almost having the attitude of throw them in jail and let God figure out what happens after that.
Yep.
But then as you evolved in your career, became chief, you developed a relationship nationally for being the leaders in community policing.
Right, yeah.
What was the evolution there?
I never really acclimated to the police environment, culture. I have always more identified with people in the community. Never really, I felt more comfortable with my uniform off than I did with my uniform on. And I've always been an outlier. Had my challenges with the police unions. I really am a pushback from the police culture. I push back, don't like some things about it. Like taking care of each other at all costs, even if you're wrong. I'm not for that. So, one of the things that I've really grown to understand more and more as I approach 65 this October is, I've always been comfortable in my own skin, and I've always identified with just regular people working and never felt like I was better than anybody. And that comes right from my mom. My mom raised me like that. Like, nobody's better than you, but you're no better than anybody else. She says it real quick too. Like that sentence runs together when my mom says that to keep me grounded in kind of who I am, where I come from, making sure I don't forget how to treat people.
We were in so many sessions, and I remember this. And you knew the communities, especially some of the communities in the tougher parts of our community. And I was always impressed because you would sit down with people and say, I understand your issue. I've been there. I've lived through those issues. Enormous amount of empathy. But then you'd always take the next step and say, but I will always protect my police officers, and I'm not going to let any harm come to them.
That's right.
Quite a balance.
Yeah, it's a even more difficult balance as we've gotten much more political with policing. Almost impossible to do now, to find that balance. Most police chiefs, one figure I've heard recently, we had a 70% turnover of police leadership in this country in the last, since George Floyd. 70% turnover of police leadership. What was a career as a police chief that would last 5 to 7 years, 3 years, 2 years maybe, in major cities, before you're either fired or you decide I've had enough. And so you don't get... 6-year
tenures, Dallas Police was actually on the long side.
Very much so, unbeknownst to me, man. I'm 7 years as police chief here in Dallas is much longer than you can do now and still have your sensibilities about you. So, again, I would just say finding that balance with the community and with police officers, hearing your support, almost impossible to do, but police leaders have to do it. They have to strike that balance, even though, sometimes you're looked at as not supporting police when you are disciplining an officer who was clearly wrong versus, an officer who made what we call a mistake of the heart, where they were trying to do the right thing, but circumstances, just didn't fall in place and they made a mistake.
As you said, you had a pretty tough reputation.
Very much so.
As police chief. Not firing a hard line with police officers, went against police unions. I remember those conversations
too.
But earlier you mentioned George Floyd and the situation there. That police officer had 18 different citations against him.
Should have been fired years before, Joy. You would have avoided that. You should have been fired. You just can't be coddled. It's just, as much as it's difficult to face the police unions with somebody who's very popular or having to end their career, but you have to do it to protect the rest of the organization. I think about the good cops that do things the right way every day, day in, day out. That's going to be 80-90% of the people. And they sometimes are held hostage by that small percentage that don't, because leaders want to stay in their job. I mean, you do say sometimes to yourself, is this the hill I want to die on? And sometimes, it is. It's time for somebody else when you can't make that decision to come in and lead.
So let's take a look even further back in kind of the George Floyd era.
Mm-hmm.
For myself, I didn't grow up with the LA police riots. My kind of most kind of biggest flashpoint with police and police situations and unarmed men,
Mm-hmm.
all of the things that come along with that was really the 2010s, and then obviously everything that happened in 2020.
Right.
How has policing changed since going back to the LA police riots in the 90s? And there's often talk about the militarization of police and the weaponry that's used. Yeah. Talk us through what you saw as an evolution in these major metropolitan areas that you served in.
Yeah, it seems to be this pendulum swing to the extremes every time. Either police can do no wrong, pendulum swing, and then you get all these bad cases of police misconduct, to the swing that we saw, hard swing toward police are criminals, racist, yada, yada, yada. And I'm feeling like the pendulum is swinging toward a more moderate, which is where it should be, much more appreciation for police than we've seen since George Floyd. My hopes are it stays more moderate, doesn't have these hard swings left or right, because we always get these terrible cases when the bad cops see cover for my behavior because 100% police support in the community, versus I got to follow the rules. It's a noble profession. I've got to follow the rules to protect who I say is my police family, versus I get cover for bad behavior.
When I think the politics of it are so much more prevalent these days, because everyone, to your point earlier, everyone's got a phone and a camera and they're recording everything, and it's almost, for the police, I think it's hard for them to hide in a certain sense. But in a certain sense, the police also, they need to be accountable for actions.
Right.
And so what do you see as the future of policing? You talk about this kind of moderate swing that we're in. What's the future of policing? Does that moderate swing enable us to reinvigorate the police forces around the country and to rehire great leaders?
I've got a concern. And the concern is young people are not choosing this profession at the levels they have in the past, historically. Young people are deciding that's not for me. In big numbers. Even though the pendulum is swinging back to a moderate view of police, I don't believe young people have changed their opinion of policing much. And they're choosing other careers. And I don't believe money is a solution. I think you still need to raise the salaries and improve the pensions. But that's not, you've got to figure out a way to, what's the savior of policing is going to be young people wanting to do it, not us old farts,
But what happens to communities? I look and see, not here locally, but if you look at Baltimore, all indications, not much support for the police over the last several years. And it seems to me, at least on an anecdotal basis, that you've got a lot of instances where police won't engage. They'll literally wait until there's things to pick up after all the problems have come.
Right.
How do you balance that? Because it seems to me the communities are the ones that really lose in that you don't have a police that's going out and doing active policing, trying to prevent issues, and instead say, I don't have any support, so as a result, why should I take any risk at all?
Right. I had this great line that I still believe is true during the shootings we talked about in 2016 downtown, where 5 officers lost their life. I was really tired and frustrated, so I was kind of raw. It's like, put down your protest sign, put in an application. We need you to work in the very communities you're protesting about.
That went viral.
Yeah. I still believe that's true. I think that call to arms, no pun intended, but that call to engage in policing, that change that you want to happen is you being involved. That democracy is participatory. It's not a spectator democracy. You got to be involved, particularly if you're from the community. And it was me saying, "Look at me. This is why I did what I did, because I'm from the community and I saw a need, and I sacrificed, things I could have done otherwise to serve the community."
But you come from a unique position in policing today. You had a situation in Dallas where a police force probably as supportive as any place in the nation, and as good a reputation of a police force as any place in the nation.
Yep.
Then, several years later, you step up and say, okay, I'll take on the Chicago Police Department. I'll lead that. A police department that doesn't have the best reputation at times.
Right.
And on top of that, has a community that looks at it in a very different way.
Yeah, very much so.
Talk about that kind of change that you had to go through from a leadership position when you got two very different environments all of a sudden.
Right. This would be some breaking news in Chicago. I never took the job to be the leader for the Chicago Police Department that would endure the change for Chicago. That always had to come from Chicagoans, someone internally. When you look to go outside because you've exhausted the leadership that you think can change your police departments and improve the relationship with the community, it should always to be to develop that internal candidate to be the succession for you. And that's what I thought. I said, I go here and do this under the context of every police superintendent in Chicago prior to me. The one right before me got fired. One before him got fired. One before him got fired. It was like 5 in a row got fired. It was like, go there and don't get fired. You know what I mean? It's like, go there and don't get fired and develop leadership to be ready at any moment because you might get fired. You know what I mean? So I had a sense of urgency to develop a group of leaders. And again, I reached down and looked everywhere, to about 13,000 cops. And was really sizing people up. Are you a leader? Can you make tough decisions? Are you competent? That kind of thing. Here, promotion for you. I felt like Oprah. Here's a promotion to you. Here's a promotion to you. Everybody get a promotion that has some competency about them, some leadership skills, and hopefully when I leave, there's a good group of people to choose from that can lead this organization the way it should be led, that are from Chicago, born and bred.
How much of that is from the community side versus the political environment in Chicago?
Yeah, the political side is not what you want to do in Chicago. 50 aldermen, like 50 city council persons, a strong mayor form of government, increasingly more corruption than other cities. There were like 3 aldermen indicted while I was there. So, very serious
and you
corruption.
had to turn your back on that very early.
Very, very early. But a beautiful city, great people, good people in the department. I'm proud that one of the people that I had the opportunity to promote twice to 2 ranks end up being the person that gets selected to succeed me, who is from Chicago, from a tough neighborhood in Chicago. I mean, he's doing a really good job from all accounts, and with the hopes of he's developing people. Because again, it's a 2-3 year window, and then it's somebody else's turn, and you just hope that you're constantly developing leaders that can change that narrative from the community's perspective of you as a police department.
Yeah, tough environment to change a culture when you've only got 2 or 3 years.
Talk me through the differences on Dallas and Chicago. I mean, there's no secret Dallas is very much separated by the Trinity River. South Dallas and North Dallas are totally different ecosystems, different people. Right. Chicago seems to be a little bit of the same, where you've got the northwest and northern suburbs that are nice. Obviously, the south side of Chicago is just a different environment. Talk me through how you view the different types of people or ecosystems in the community. How did you view that differently?
Yeah, it was really, drinking from fire hydrant with the politics of it. and the demographics. So the politics, obviously, different politics. Strong mayor form of government versus Dallas, and the demographics were different. Where Chicago is much more diverse and segregated than Dallas, which is like crazy. And then the politics of, you run as a Democrat, but that's not always the same flavor as a Texas Democrat. So they're Democratic Socialists. And then I went into one of the alderman's office that was a Democrat that had Trump everywhere in the office. So Trump Democrats are a thing in Chicago, where they appear on Fox News. So you got all Democrats in all different shapes and forms. And you've got to, as an outsider, know the difference. You got to know which one's more conservative, which one's more liberal, which ones are more socialist. And it's all an accepted thing in a segregated, very diverse city with just, nice people, the lakefront, they're gorgeous. The downtown, gorgeous restaurants. I would be a regular at Michael Jordan's restaurant downtown, some of the best steak, and really an embracing community. I mean, the business community embraced me. It's just really some of the same things that happened in Dallas, just because I was coming there and they saw, I'm not coming here to take over. I'm coming here to help develop leaders from Chicago to succeed me from day one. Yeah.
So I've got a random question. Tom doesn't know I'm going to ask this, but what was the biggest run-in the two of you have ever had?
Ooh, we didn't have any hardly.
You didn't put this guy in his seat once?
No. We had some difficult decisions. Obviously, one of the ones I'll speak about more. And I don't want you don't have to time. I'm gonna toot his horn. I don't know how he hired 200 cops over attrition. Attrition is 200. And pass that through the budget. I was like, this ain't gonna happen. And then the closer we got to budget, I'm like, this ain't gonna happen. Man, this might happen. It's like that's the most cops ever hired in our city's history.
Well, we went from about 2,900 to about a little bit over 3,700.
Yep.
Probably the largest increase in a police force in the space of 3 years.
Wow.
Right.
Any place in the nation of a police force of any size, at least since the Depression and probably back to 1900.
Wow.
We get halfway through this hiring surge in Dallas, and we hit the lowest murder rate in 80 years in Dallas. We're just halfway through this, and then as we get closer to half, we have the lowest response times in city's history. We were on the spot. We were dealing with the violent crime. The lowest rates still in this city's history during his tenure, prompted by his ability to get 8 votes or more on a budget that just, it seems unbelievable that he was able to carve out money. This is no federal dollars. This is just prioritizing where the dollars are spent through, in my opinion, just fascinating politics.
I think a lot of that came from framing the problem. Because when I came in, and I'd like you to comment on this, it was difficult to get folks engaged on adding police officers, especially in the southern part of the city, because for a long period of time, not under the more current police department, but a perception that went back decades, for a lot of parts of the community, they didn't want additional police officers because historically, back 50s, 60s, police departments weren't very kind to minority communities.
Yeah, correct.
So what we did is instead of framing it as simply adding police officers, we framed it as an economic development question. And by an economic development question, those neighborhoods needed to have jobs and investment, and they understood it. But you couldn't do that with high crime rates.
That's right.
And that became the leverage to really make the changes that the chiefs talked about.
Yeah, but it's a masterclass in political persuasion on this man's part. I still marvel at how he was able to pull that off.
So I've gotten the opportunity to go attend church in South Dallas the last few years at Watermark South Dallas campus in a food desert area, and an area that is frankly riddled with crime. The church is known that you kind of don't spend time down there after dark.
Yeah.
How do we get past that as a community? How does that happen? How do the police and the neighborhood and the community policing kind of not infiltrate, because that's the wrong word, but
Yeah.
engage that community well to go in and make it to where you do want to be down there? And is it part of framing some of the question? Is it, how do we bring jobs back? Obviously, you've got a food desert situation as well, and so that's not helpful. But just give us your thoughts on how do you re-engage communities like that?
I don't think it's magic. Dallas has done it before. It's just that how it's done and what the results you want. So no one would say what you just said about Uptown today. But Uptown was like one of the most dangerous Black communities in the city's history prior to economic development.
Over by Baylor, too.
Yeah. So my answer is, let's look at our past and let's replicate it and figure out how we don't gentrify and still have a place for affordable housing and jobs that are close to where you live. So that's just the Uptown example is the example. How do we get those types of developers south of the river?
Take what Kyle said, but come at a different angle. Again, in your book, you talk about the importance of faith in your life. That it was that community that you talked about where you grew up before the cocaine came in, that was a faith-based community.
That's right.
It's always been a part of you. It's been the source of your perseverance, dealing with some of the issues that we talked about earlier. Talk about faith in your life.
So it's very personal for me. As I get older, even more personal for me, and being an example for family members, younger family members, but also people in the community. Not just your time given to people on a more personal level. I've become less and less corporate in my faith, less and less have to attend church on Sunday, more and more, what time have you spent with a person and how helpful have you been with your time, talent, and your money? Your treasure. So I would say all that applies to all of us, regardless of your faith. That we need to make time for people. We need to lend our talents to people, and we need to obviously have availability for treasure. Some people tithe. That's their. Here you go. I gave at church, and don't ask me for any more of my time or talent or any more of my money, other than maybe something I give with a nonprofit. I like seeing where my money helps, so I'm more likely to help people in multiple ways wherever I am in all those three areas.
Yeah, two observations on that. I think what you described in the story earlier with your partner and just, I think, acutely being aware of a situation with a kid coming back from college. There's a lot of truth and grace, as the Bible talks about.
That's right.
And how do you take truth and grace and live that out? And then the second observation, as I just listened to you, is your faith is relational. It should be, because that's what Scripture teaches. That's how we get to know Jesus better. But the relational element also bleeds into how you serve and love people. Again, that truth and grace kind of idea, I think, is critical, just as obviously as you've lived it out so well. And I thank you as someone who grew up in this city and has never left. Thank you for leading us well and taking us to a higher standard.
Very cool.
Let's talk about a couple of tough issues that are sitting out there that apply to the police.
Yeah.
The defund the police. A couple of years ago, it was all over.
Horrible.
A number of communities adopted it.
Yeah.
Talk about how you view it and how you view what's happened to those communities.
I don't think we could have been aware. I don't want to sound like James Carville. But I don't think it could have been a worse messaging from a political party to impact communities in the most negative way. The people that need the police the most had the hardest hit on this. I mean, they just, people suffer. I think young people have it etched in their mind, that narrative. And I think that's part of, I don't want to be a cop, kind of movement now with, difficulty recruiting people. I think the funding, I think it was what I'll call ass backwards. I mean, you were trying to be more diverse. You were trying to be, obviously impact training, new training on people so they could, obviously be better equipped to deal with the communities. And defund the police actually kept you from doing all that, because the most diverse cops you hire are the rookies, the well-trained officers are the younger officers. Those are the people who positions got cut. Your dollars are, 99%, people. I mean, the equipment is just like 1-2% of the budget. It's really the salaries are the major part of the budget. So when you cut budgets, you cut salaries, you lose diverse cops that are well trained and who likely will never want to come back. So I think we're still feeling the impacts of that.
Yeah, I always thought it much more of a political agenda than it was a policy, because much like you, I spent a lot of time in some of the tougher parts of our community. And women and children, minority women and children especially, police officers, and with the caveat that we want good police officers, they were what was needed for those individuals and in those communities.
Yeah, and then, you pair that with the defund the police movement with state prosecutors, district attorneys, all having a political agenda rather than just taking the case as you see it and charging and prosecuting the person as the law dictates. That undid quite a bit. Now, I would say that's been pushed back, obviously. You look at San Francisco right now, I mean, it's just got the opposite district attorney than they had during the defund the police movement. So, a lot of harm was done. And to me, one of the big takeaways is try to keep politics out of policing as much as you can. It is the most difficult thing to do today, but you don't end up with good results when policing decisions are made because of political agendas. You just don't.
But we still have a lot of prosecutors out there that are still advocating, anything under $999, $1,000, we're not going to prosecute. Seems to me people have figured out what things you can walk away with for $999.
Until that's your stuff taken, and then nobody thinks that's a big deal if it's under a certain dollar amount until it's your hard-earned money.
But we still have that. Why do we still have prosecutors, even with the examples that we've learned?
Yeah.
Why?
It's who funds the campaign. It is a rule of politics is that the funders have a quite a persuasive argument. I gave you money, so do this thing that I believe in.
But why do those folks advocate that? The people that are funding it, what's their underlying agenda? Do you think?
I'm not sure. I don't want to name a name, but there's one particular funder that kind of is the funder of all funders of this movement, and I don't understand.
And actually, one of the wealthiest.
Yeah, and then I don't understand his views because he's not been impacted. He's not from these types of neighborhoods. He's not taking the time to understand these neighborhoods. If he listened to people like my mom, he would have a different opinion about somebody breaking in your house or breaking into the convenience store. Now they got to lock up everything that I want to buy. I got to go try to find a clerk to go get my prescriptions or my Advil or the things I need as a senior in my neighborhood. So, and then Walmart moves out. The store that I get my prescription moves out now because of your policies. He would have heard all that and would have taken a different position though. But obviously, nobody's coached him up on, this stuff is undoing a lot of things that these communities depend on. And maybe your dollars are better spent some other way. But obviously, he's not someone that'll listen to reason.
No,
he does just this. But that's really kind of some of the things that people with money have these opinions without listening to the people that it affects. I just hopeful that could change.
That's unfortunate.
So do you view the institutional issues that we've been discussing, do you view these as generational? Do you see the tide can shift? I mean, obviously your commentary about, put down your protest poster and pick up an application.
Yeah, I'm always hopeful because I'm hopeful in young people. I pour a lot into young people. I'm serving as a chief operating officer at a law firm right now. One of the things that I've taken upon myself is not only giving our young people an opportunity when we have positions, and I have a little bit of a cheat code. I am an advocate of women in positions, much more that have been traditionally male roles. I think some of that is part of the problem. Us men can screw up some stuff. You know what I mean? Just based on us and our testosterone kind
of
ego, all that stuff.
Okay.
I think a healthy balance of women in the workplace in these positions to make decisions as well can bring some balance, not just around race. I think around gender as well, giving women opportunity. My mother was a lot of the first, in jobs that she had, and kind of took it on the chin from men who threatened by a woman in the workplace. Can you imagine? I mean, my mom.
I saw it with my mom too.
Yeah. She come home crying based on how men treated her because she was a bank manager, and like the men were like, we never had a woman bank manager. We're gonna make you quit, and she would never quit. She would just endure. So yeah, I've just kind of taken it upon myself. It's kind of how I practice my faith is trying to have an impact in people's lives.
So talk me through. You talked about being about to be 65 or so. What does the next 2 decades look like for you?
Well, one of the things I was hoping to hear, and you don't look like it, but apparently I do. Apparently I do. But so I look 65 almost. So what do I see for the future? I think this poem, I want to be thoroughly exhausted when I die, having done the good works. You know what I mean? That's kind of the thing. I don't want to die with a lot of energy. I want to have really spent myself, mostly helping people. And that promise I made my family when I went to University of Texas to help us get out of poverty. So estate plannings have been on my mind quite a bit. What every dollar, every dime, how does it go help other Browns, unborn Browns, or very Browns in diapers, that kind of thing. So it's not for me to spend on this great luxury that I could spend it on. It's to be helping people in my family and beyond, even people not related to me. How can I help? Hire relatives of people that in the law firm. I just feel I just have this family thing where, if we're not helping young people, man, what are we doing? We're just collecting pennies. Can't take it with you. I mean, so yeah, that's kind of the thing for me for the rest of the time the good Lord sees for me.
You've lived a life of service. Even your wife too. She was a sergeant on the police department.
That's right. She's a veteran, 20-year veteran who had to retire when I became police chief. So yeah, we're invested in this idea of serving other people,
and maybe invested in going to a few UT games.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's looking good this year.
It is looking good.
Arch Manning. I'm not going to say much. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, Chief,
all good stuff.
We want to thank you for being with us, but much more importantly, thank you for all of your service.
Thank you,
I can't think of another person who has added as much to 2 different communities as you have in very difficult times in both situations. And it was always an honor and a privilege for me to be able to work with you. You made this city so much better, and you made my tenure so much better too. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Chief, thank you.
Thank you for the time.
Goodbye.
Appreciate it.
All right. Good talking to you. Good talking to you, man. All right.